If someone you love ever smiles and says, "Say hi to the bear," pay attention. It might be the last harmless thing you hear before everything you built is put on the chopping block. Before I dive in, please subscribe to the channel and tell me where you're listening from in the comments. Stories like this keep our community strong, and your support helps more people hear them. My name is Kristen. I'm a quiet woman with a loud life, late 50s, widowed, the kind of person who keeps lists, pays debts early, and remembers birthdays. I built my comfort the long way. A landscaping company that I nurtured from a rusted pickup and a second-hand mower into a regional brand with city contracts, corporate campuses, and a waiting list of clients who like their hedges as precise as my calendars. When my husband Mark passed, I learned the other meaning of pruning, cutting back the overgrowth of grief so something living can still find light. I also learned what it means to become the family bank. I don't say that with bitterness. I took pride in helping my son Daniel through grad school, and when he married Samantha, I put the down payment on their first condo and welcomed her with the same silver bangle I wore on my first anniversary. I told myself generosity is how love breathes. Generosity, unfortunately, is also how entitlement grows. Samantha is beautiful in the way that makes strangers offer help. Glossy hair, glossy compliments, a talent for turning any room into a mirror. She called me Mom by the second month of dating and made me feel like the final puzzle piece in a framed picture of a perfect family. But over time the picture warped. A raised eyebrow when I asked about their spending, a joking comment about how retirement money is happier outdoors, a sulk when I didn't co-sign a luxury car. The arguments with Daniel were small and well-lit like candles, controlled, careful, and gone as soon as we blew them out. "She's ambitious," he'd say, "and that's not a crime." He wasn't wrong. He just didn't see where the ambition was aimed. So when they suggested a family day trip to the national forest, fresh air, photos, reconnecting, I wanted to believe the best. I packed practical things: protein bars, a stainless steel water bottle, a wool scarf even though the app said 68 and sunny. Samantha wore white sneakers impractical enough to be a thesis statement and carried a tiny backpack that probably held lip balm and a plan. The drive was an hour of cheerful music and Samantha's accidental compliments. "Mom, your skin is amazing. What's your secret?" "Hard work," I said. "And sunscreen." She laughed. "You're so old school." "I love that." We parked by a stand of pines that stitched the sky into a quilt of needles and light. A wooden sign warned about bears. "Do not approach," with a cheerful cartoon and an undercurrent of teeth. Samantha insisted on a photo. "3 generations of strength," she said, positioning us with the sign behind me like an omen I was too polite to move. We followed a trail that curved around a ravine. Samantha moved with a dancer's balance, pausing to point out a mushroom like a little white ear stuck to dead bark. Daniel told a story about a coworker who microwaved fish. I listened and nodded and kept inventory. Moss slick as soap, the far-off thud of water, the way the sun made a chainmail pattern across the path. An hour in, we found a clearing. A flat oval pressed into the trees, one log like a bench, one stump like a table. Samantha clapped her hands. "Snack time." She opened her tiny backpack and produced a single granola bar with an actress's flourish. "Oops," she said, face twisting into cute contrition. "I thought we packed more." "It's fine," I said, because I am the sort of person who always says it's fine. "I've got bars in my pack." I reached for my bag and felt air. I distinctly remembered placing it in the back seat. I distinctly remembered slinging it over my shoulder. I distinctly remembered the weight. The absence was a sudden cliff inside my chest. "I must have left it in the car," I said. Samantha's mouth made a perfect sympathy. "Oh no. Per Mom. Daniel, why don't you go grab it? You're faster." Daniel shook his head. "My knee's acting up. I'll slow you down." Samantha sighed dramatically, then brightened. "I'll go with you. We'll be right back, Mom. Stay here and rest." She glanced at my shoes. "You don't want to overdo it." "I'll come," I said automatically, because I've never been good at sitting while others carry. "No," Samantha said lightly, but there was steel flicking under the silk. "The trail back is narrow. 2 is ideal. We'll be 20 minutes. I looked at Daniel. He looked at the ground. "We won't be long," he said. They left laughing. Some private joke that made Samantha swing her ponytail. The forest swallowed their voices quickly, the way water closes over a thrown stone. I sat on the log because that felt like what a reasonable person would do, and I am so very concerned with reason. Minutes slid. Wind combed the pines. I tied and untied my scarf. A squirrel shot across the clearing, tail like punctuation. I checked my phone by habit. The signal bars were gone like a magician's coin. When 30 minutes passed, I stood. When 40 did, I began to walk. Back the way we came, I told myself, though the path was a polite snake and every turn looked like the last one in a mirror. At the fork near the fallen cedar, I hesitated. The trail markers were orange plastic flags stapled to trees. Someone had peeled one away, leaving only a rusted staple and a pale rectangle of bark. I chose left and hoped I was right. Another 20 minutes and I knew I wasn't. It happened in small, humiliating sips rather than a single gulp. The realization that my son and his wife were not late. They were gone. That I was not on the path, I was off it. That my bag with its water and whistle and solar charger was not forgotten. It was removed. I stopped in a patch of shadow that smelled like cold iron. That's when I saw them. Prints. Not boot treads, not deer's 2 neat leaves. These impressions were wide and round with 5 claws raked into the mud like commas. A bear had passed here not long ago. I listened and heard my own pulse. A branch cracked deeper in the trees. Not wind. Heavy, deliberate. The air changed the way a room changes when another person enters it. I turned slowly because sudden movements make predators curious. I didn't see the bear. I saw a smear of darker shade sliding between trunks, a suggestion more than a shape. Then silence again, which was somehow worse. I forced my breath into even squares. 1, 2, 3, 4. My therapist taught me that after Mark died, when panic felt like drowning with my eyes open. It's astonishing how grief and fear share a wardrobe. When I trusted my legs not to betray me, I moved, not running, never run from a bear, not shaking so much that I couldn't place my feet. I kept my head high and my eyes alive. I talked out loud, low and steady. Hey there, big guy. I see you. You see me. We're going to mind our own business. My voice sounded like someone else's borrowed coat. I reached a break in the trees and the trail greeted me like an old friend at a crowded party. Vague, welcome, impossible to hug. I followed it until the pines thinned and the light expanded into afternoon. The parking area was a gravel ellipse. 3 cars sat like commas in a sentence I couldn't read. Our SUV was not among them. I stood very still and watched the gravel for tire arcs. There were many. None I could prove were ours. I took out my phone expecting nothing and got exactly that. The world became very bright and very quiet. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just quiet, the way a room gets when somebody hangs up without saying goodbye. I could pretend this was an accident. I could tell myself a story where Samantha and Daniel went to the ranger station because they couldn't find me, where their phones died, where help was on the way. But I have survived, and survivors know the taste of truth, even when it's served cold. I was alone. I looked at the bear sign again. This time the cartoon felt like mockery. Do not approach. It didn't say anything about not being approached. I checked every door on the other cars just in case someone else had been careless. They were locked. A paper map in a glass case near the trailhead showed a tangle of lines like veins. I traced a finger to the ranger station 2 miles to the west. The arrow pointing that way had been twisted sideways. A fresh SUV rolled into the lot, music thudding. 2 teenagers hopped out with fishing poles. Afternoon, I said and heard the strain in my voice. You wouldn't happen to have a spare bottle of water you could sell me, would you? I held up a 20 like a flag. They did. I thanked them with more warmth than water deserves and asked if the ranger station was walkable. Totally, one said. Just, bears. He laughed because he has never been left for dead by anyone who calls him family. I started walking. The gravel gave way to packed dirt, the rhythm of my steps a metronome for all the thoughts I would not allow. Samantha's last look over her shoulder, the little wave, the way she said rest as if the word meant disappear. I have been generous my whole life because I believed in enough. Enough money, enough kindness, enough second chances. On that road, with the woods exhaling and the sky narrowing toward evening, I learned to believe in limits. I reached the ranger station as the sun tilted. It was a low building with a metal roof and a bulletin board stapled with lost dog posters. Through the window I saw a man in a green shirt, gray hair pulled back, eyes like flint that had learned how not to spark unless needed. His name tag said Henry. He opened the door before I knocked, as if he'd been expecting me the way the ocean expects shipwrecks. "You look like you've had a day," he said. "Something like that." He gave me water that didn't taste like fear and a chair that didn't look like pity. "Tell me what happened," Henry said, and I did, starting with the photo by the bear sign and ending with the empty parking lot. He didn't interrupt. When I was finished, he chewed on silence for a moment like a man considering a stubborn knot. "Ma'am," he said finally, "I think you should call this in. Not as lost and found. As abandonment." I looked at my phone lying on his desk, now humming with a sliver of signal it hadn't had in the trees. The truth stood up inside me and stretched its legs. "Not yet," I said. "First, I need to go home." Henry's eyebrows rose. "To them." "To my house," I said. "To my files. To my accounts. To the part of my life that still belongs to me." "You shouldn't go alone." "I won't," I said, surprising us both. He studied me the way the forest had, assessing, weighing. Then he nodded once, a tree choosing not to fall. "All right," he said. "Let me lock up." As we stepped outside, the first thin ribbon of dusk pulled tight between the trees. Somewhere far off, a sound rolled over the leaves, low, old, and uninterested in human dramas. The bear or the fact of it? I tightened my scarf. I thought of Samantha's immaculate sneakers and Daniel's soft, "We won't be long," and the long, hungry space those words had opened. They had left me to the wild because they believed I would become part of it. A headline, a rumor, a story told at holidays with a shrug. They didn't understand the one thing that had built my life and would now save it. I do not vanish. I plan. And when I walked back into my home, I would not be alone. What would you have done in my place? Call the police immediately or go straight home and secure everything first? Tell me in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happened when I opened my front door. The ranger station smelled of old coffee and pine disinfectant, the kind of place where time pauses but never really rests. Henry poured himself a cup and one for me, as if caffeine might stitch the frayed edges of my nerves back together. I wrapped my fingers around the paper cup, letting the heat anchor me. "You sure you don't want me to call this in now?" he asked. His tone wasn't pushy, but it carried the weight of someone who had seen too many bad endings. "I need to be smart," I said quietly. "If I go straight to the police, Samantha and Daniel will know I'm alive before I'm ready. They'll move the money. They'll bury the evidence. I need them to believe I'm still out there somewhere in the dark." Henry studied me like a puzzle piece he hadn't expected to find in his box. Then he nodded once. "All right. You play it your way. But if you're walking back into a snake's nest, you're not walking in alone." That was the beginning of a strange partnership. Me, a woman betrayed by her own family, and Henry, a man who had spent years watching the woods swallow both fools and liars. He lent me a spare jacket, heavy canvas with a ranger patch faded nearly white, and drove me in his pickup down roads that seemed to remember every wheel that had ever rolled across them. During the ride, I stared out at the blur of trees, but my mind wasn't in the forest anymore. It was replaying every conversation with Samantha, every tilted smile and every joke about how convenient it would be when I was gone. I thought of Daniel's silence, the way he always smoothed over her cruelty like a man ironing a shirt that wasn't his. Love had blinded him, or maybe greed had spoken louder. Both left me stranded. When we reached my house, it was dark. Lights off, curtains drawn. But Samantha's silver car was in the driveway, angled like she owned the concrete it sat on. I crouched low as Henry parked a block away. "They're inside," I whispered. "And they think you're not," he said. His voice carried no judgment, only fact. We moved quietly through the side gate, past the rose bushes I had planted 20 years ago when Mark was still alive. Their thorny silhouettes against the moonlight looked like a warning I had never taken seriously. Through the kitchen window I saw them. Samantha sat at the table with a glass of wine, flipping through my file folders. Bank statements, property deeds, the careful records of a lifetime. Daniel leaned against the counter, his face pale and tired. "She'll be declared dead within a week if they don't find a body," Samantha said. "We'll file for probate immediately. I'll handle the accounts." My chest tightened. She said it so easily, as if the erasure of my life was just another errand. Daniel hesitated. "Mom wouldn't just wander off. Someone might." "Might what?" she snapped. "Survive a night in the forest? Please. He's gone and you know it. You need to stop clinging and start planning." This money is our future. Henry touched my arm lightly, a signal to breathe. His calm steadied me. I didn't storm in. Not yet. Rage wanted me to kick the door open and scream their betrayal into their faces, but rage without evidence was useless. Instead, I pulled my phone from my pocket. Henry's ranger training had taught him patience and silence. My life's work had taught me documentation. We recorded. Samantha continued, voice smooth as cream. Once everything is signed over, we'll move. I want to be in the city by next spring. This house, ugh, it smells like her. We'll sell it. Daniel said nothing. Silence can be as damning as any confession. I pressed stop on the recording, my hands steady in a way I hadn't expected. They thought I was lost to the woods, claimed by claws and shadows. They didn't know I was standing right outside with truth building in my pocket. Henry leaned close and whispered, "What now?" "Now," I said, "we let them dig their own hole a little deeper. And when it's deep enough, I'll be the one holding the rope." We slipped back into the night, leaving them in their bubble of greed, unaware the air was already thinning. As Henry drove me to his cabin to rest, I stared at the moon and thought about how betrayal doesn't feel like a knife. It feels like a door closing behind you while you're still inside. But I had found another door. I had found a way out. And the next time I stepped through, I wouldn't be alone or unprepared. Would you confront them right then and there, or would you wait, gather proof, build the trap, and make sure their downfall is permanent? The morning light came thin and silver through the blinds of Henry's cabin. I woke stiff from the couch but clearer than I had in weeks. Betrayal has a way of cutting the fog from your brain. Once you've seen the truth, you can't unsee it. Henry poured coffee into mismatched mugs and set one in front of me. "You don't have to go through this alone," he said. "But you need a plan that won't just hurt them, it has to end them." I nodded, my fingers tightening around the warm mug. "They left me for dead in those woods. That's not just betrayal. That's murder in their hearts. If I want justice, it has to be airtight." We spent the day mapping steps. First, protect what was mine. I called my lawyer, Ellen, from Henry's landline, her voice crisp, concerned, professional. I didn't tell her everything, only enough that Samantha and Daniel were attempting to access my accounts under the assumption I was missing. She froze. "Kristen, don't speak another word over the phone. Meet me in my office tomorrow. Bring any evidence you already have." I had Henry drive me back to my home late that evening. I didn't go inside. Not yet. Instead, I left a motion-activated camera hidden in the hedge near the kitchen window. If Samantha rifled through my documents again, I'd have her on tape. I hid another recorder under the porch where voices carried when they stepped outside to argue. It felt strange, planting devices around the home I had once filled with roses and laughter, but war requires tools. Over the next 2 days, I stayed in Henry's cabin while the forest whispered around us. It should have been peaceful, but every sound reminded me of that clearing, of the prints in the mud, of Samantha's mocking smile. At night I lay awake hearing the echo, "Say hi to the bear." On the third day the camera caught exactly what I'd prayed for and dreaded. Samantha sat at my kitchen table with a notary she had hired, sliding forged documents across the wood. She was attempting to sign my name to transfer property rights. The footage was crystal clear. Her hand, her words, her intent. Daniel hovered in the background, face drawn, but he didn't stop her. Silence again, his favorite crime. When I showed Ellen the video, her eyes hardened. "This isn't just inheritance fraud. It's attempted identity theft. And with your account of the woods, this edges toward conspiracy to murder." The words should have shaken me. Instead they steadied me. Because now it wasn't just my suspicion. It was law. That evening I decided it was time to step closer, to remind them that ghosts can return home. I waited until Samantha and Daniel left the house for dinner. Fitting, since they were celebrating what they thought was the final stage of their plan. Then I unlocked my own door with the spare key they hadn't thought to confiscate. Inside, the air smelled wrong. Wine, perfume, greed. My dining room table was cluttered with my own documents, my pen collection, even the silver photo frame with Mark's smile. They had desecrated everything sacred, treating it like their staging ground. I sat at the head of the table, the place I'd sat 1,000 times before during holidays, and spread out the copies of the video and recordings in neat piles. Then I waited. The door creaked an hour later. Laughter floated in before they did. Samantha's high-pitched giggle, Daniel's softer chuckle. Then they saw me. The laughter cracked and fell silent. Samantha froze in the doorway, clutching her designer purse as if it could shield her. Daniel's eyes widened, his face turning paper white. "Hello," I said calmly, my voice steady as stone. "Miss me?" For a long heartbeat, no one moved. The silence was louder than any scream. Then Samantha's face twisted into something sharp. How? I told you once," I cut her off, "that generosity is not weakness. You mistook it for permission. That mistake ends tonight." I tapped the stack of recordings in front of me. "I have everything I need. And tomorrow so will the authorities." Daniel took a step forward, his lips parting as if to beg. But his voice didn't come. His silence was a confession in itself. Samantha dropped her purse on the floor. The sound echoed like a gavel in a courtroom. They had left me in the woods to die. Now I was home and I wasn't the prey anymore. "Tell me, if you were in my place, would you hand everything to the police immediately, or would you let them sit in fear, knowing every tick of the clock could be the one that ends their freedom?" The look on Samantha's face that night haunted me long after she and Daniel backed out of the room. It wasn't fear alone. It was calculation, the eyes of a woman already weaving her next lie. I didn't stop them from leaving. Not yet. A snake coils tighter if you grab it too soon. Better to let it slither in circles, thinking it still owns the grass while you hold the blade ready. After they left, I gathered the recordings, tucked them into a sealed envelope, and drove them to Ellen's office before dawn. She listened, jaw tight, eyes cold, pausing only to mark pages with yellow tabs. "This is more than enough," she said. "Forgery, fraud, conspiracy. But I know you, Kristen. You don't just want a courtroom victory. You want them broken." She wasn't wrong. A judgment could jail them. But humiliation, that was justice. They wanted my money. They wanted my name. What they would get instead was the ruin of theirs. Ellen helped me secure my accounts that morning, moving the bulk of my assets into a trust neither Daniel nor Samantha could ever touch. My will was revised with a flourish of signatures. Everything that might have gone to them now rerouted to charity, to scholarships for young women starting businesses like I once had. It felt poetic. What they tried to steal would now build the kind of futures they didn't deserve. Meanwhile, Henry kept watch near my house, feeding me updates. He was the kind of man who could blend into a tree line without effort, and Samantha never noticed him. Through his binoculars, he saw her pacing on my porch, phone pressed to her ear, voice sharp. He couldn't hear the words, but I knew the tone. Fury at a plan unraveling. I didn't confront her again right away. Instead, I let the silence work on her. Days stretched. I stayed out of sight, letting Samantha and Daniel think every knock at the door, every strange car parked down the street could be me, or worse, the law. Fear is a slow poison, and I wanted them to drink deeply. But I wasn't idle. I reached out to old friends, clients, even a journalist I trusted. Quietly, I began planting seeds of the story. Not gossip, not slander. Facts, recordings, documents. A woman nearly murdered for her inheritance. A daughter-in-law's greed. A son's betrayal. The story had teeth, and I made sure they gleamed. One night, Henry and I watched from across the street as Samantha hosted a small gathering. Glasses clinked, laughter spilled through the windows, but beneath it I saw the desperation. She was trying to project control, to convince her circle she was untouchable. That was when I decided the time had come. The following morning, I visited Daniel at his office, unannounced. His secretary startled when she saw me, as if she, too, believed I had vanished into the woods. Daniel stumbled over his words, pale and sweating. "Mom," he whispered. You thought wrong," I said, sliding a copy of the forged papers onto his desk. His hands trembled as he flipped through them. "You signed nothing, Daniel, but silence is consent. And silence is guilt." He broke then, head in his hands, voice cracked. "She said it was the only way. She said we'd be set for life. I didn't know she'd leave you like that." His confession wasn't for me, it was for himself, a desperate attempt to wash away the stain. But it only proved what I already knew. Samantha may have been the architect, but Daniel laid the foundation with his cowardice. I leaned close, my voice low enough to pin him to the chair. "I don't need your excuses. I need your cooperation. Tomorrow night, Samantha will think she's celebrating her victory. You will be there. And so will I." He stared at me, torn between fear of his wife and the inevitability of exposure. But I saw it, the flicker of surrender. He nodded, slowly, like a man signing his own sentence. That night, I stood at my window and looked out at the garden Mark and I once tended together. The roses were in bloom, sharp with thorns but fragrant with resilience. I thought of Samantha's mocking voice in the forest, her cold smirk when she said, "Say hi to the bear." She had thrown me into nature's jaws, certain I'd never crawl back. But tomorrow she would learn something Samantha never understood. I am not prey. I am patience. And I was ready to walk into her party with the one thing she never expected: truth sharpened to a blade. Would you reveal everything in public at once, letting the humiliation burn bright, or drag it out slowly so every piece of their reputation crumbles bit by bit? The night of Samantha's celebration came like a storm I had been waiting for all my life. Her invitations had gone out in whispers. An intimate gathering, she called it. Just a few friends, some champagne, and the smug glow of a woman convinced her plans had worked. She thought I was either buried under pine needles or drowning in legal confusion. What she didn't know was that I was already inside the fire, holding the match. Daniel had done his part. He told her he would handle the drinks and made sure I knew exactly when to arrive. I didn't trust him fully. Cowards bend whichever way the wind blows. But for once his cowardice bent toward me. He wanted out of her trap even if he had already sunk too deep. Henry drove me to the house. We parked far enough down the street that no one would notice. As we approached, I could already hear laughter, clinking glasses, Samantha's high, sharp voice cutting through the night. My own home turned into a stage for her delusion. I didn't knock. I opened the door with my key, the one she hadn't thought to confiscate. Conversation froze. All eyes turned toward me as I stepped into the room, calm, collected, every inch alive. Samantha was standing near the fireplace, a glass of champagne in her hand. She looked at me as if she were seeing a ghost rise out of the grave she had dug. For the first time her perfect smile faltered. "Hello everyone," I said evenly. "I hope you don't mind that I've joined the party. After all, this is still my house." Gasps rippled through the room. Samantha tried to recover, her voice dripping false charm. "Kristen, you're alive. We were so worried." Worried. I let the words slice the air. "You left me in the woods without food, water, or a way back. You told me to say hi to the bear. That doesn't sound like worry to me. That sounds like murder." The guests murmured, eyes darting between us. Samantha's cheeks flushed. She laughed, brittle and hollow. "She's confused. The stress, I cut her off by holding up my phone, pressing play. Her own voice spilled into the room, captured crystal clear. "She'll be declared dead within a week if they don't find a body. We'll file for probate immediately." The recording filled every corner, her tone smug, undeniable. Gasps turned into stares. One man actually set his glass down as if afraid it might shatter from the weight of the truth. Samantha's smile cracked. That's fake. It's doctored." "Really?" I held up the envelope Ellen had prepared. Inside were copies of the notarized papers she had attempted to forge, her handwriting sprawled across them in arrogant loops. "This isn't fake. This is fraud. And it's already in the hands of my attorney." Her voice rose, shrill. "Daniel, say something." But Daniel didn't move. His shoulders sagged, his eyes fixed on the floor. For once he didn't cover for her. His silence wasn't consent this time, it was defeat. The room turned colder. Guests shifted, whispering. Samantha's reputation, her carefully crafted image of charm and elegance, crumbled in front of her friends like ash in the wind. He knew it too. Her face twisted, her mask falling completely away. "You think you've won," she hissed, her voice stripped of sweetness. "But Daniel is still my husband. Everything he has is mine." Finally, Daniel looked up. His voice was flat, almost broken. "Not anymore. I'm done." The words cut through the room sharper than anything I could have said. Samantha's eyes widened, and for the first time, true fear replaced her arrogance. I stepped closer, my voice steady and final. "You wanted my life, my fortune, my home. Instead, you've lost everything. The police will come for the rest." The guests began to slip out one by one, unable to stand in the presence of such ruin. The celebration was dead. The house was silent except for Samantha's ragged breath. I turned my back on her, something I never thought I'd be able to do and feel safe. She could scheme, she could claw, but she was finished. Walking out into the night, I felt the cool air wash over me. For the first time since that day in the woods, I didn't feel hunted. I felt like the hunter who had set the trap, waited patiently, and sprung it at the perfect moment. Tomorrow the law would take her. Tonight, humiliation had already broken her spirit. Would you have stopped there, letting the law finish the work? Or would you have stayed and watched her crumble until she had nothing left? The morning after Samantha's humiliation, the sky felt different. Lighter, sharper, like the air after a storm has torn through and cleared the weight. For weeks, I had carried the silence of betrayal like a stone in my chest. That silence was gone now, replaced by the steady beat of something stronger: resolve. By sunrise, Ellen had filed the papers. Forgery, fraud, attempted inheritance theft. Every charge that could stick was already in motion. When the police knocked on Samantha's door, I wasn't there to see it, but I imagined her face. The shock, the rage, the scrambling for excuses that no one would believe anymore. I didn't need to witness it in person. The recordings, the forged documents, the guests who had heard her words themselves. They were witnesses enough. Daniel came to see me that afternoon. His face was pale, his shoulders hunched, the boy I raised still buried somewhere inside the man who had stood by while his wife tried to erase me. He sat across from me at the dining table, the table Samantha had once tried to turn into her throne, and for the first time in weeks, it was just us. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, voice cracking. "I didn't stop her. I didn't protect you." I stared at him for a long time. There was a part of me that wanted to reach across the table, to pull him into the safety of forgiveness. But another part, the part that had survived the woods, the bear's shadow, the bitter taste of betrayal, knew better. "Sorry doesn't give back what you took," I said quietly. "You stood by and let her destroy everything I built. That isn't love, Daniel. That's cowardice." His eyes filled with tears, but he didn't argue. He only nodded as if he knew the verdict had already been delivered. In a way, I pitied him more than I hated him. He had lost not only his wife but his place in my life. Samantha, of course, wasn't so quiet. The headlines came first: wealthy daughter-in-law charged in inheritance plot. Then the whispers, the social media storm, the friends who abandoned her. She had wanted to be admired, envied, adored. Instead, she became a cautionary tale, her name spoken with disdain in every circle she once tried to impress. As for me, I didn't return to the woods, but I carried them inside me. The scent of pine, the silence between the trees, the echo of my own heartbeat as I realized what had been done to me. It became a reminder. Not of fear but of strength. They had left me to die, and I had walked out alive, carrying proof, carrying justice, carrying a lesson carved into my bones. I updated my will again, not out of bitterness but clarity. My money would go to causes Samantha would have hated. Shelters for women, scholarships for those who built their futures without stealing from others, trust funds that encouraged independence rather than entitlement. If my legacy meant anything, it would be that no one could ever take from me what I wasn't willing to give. Henry stopped by often, checking in, bringing small gifts from the forest. A feather, a sprig of cedar, the kinds of things only someone who truly listens to the world notices. We shared coffee on the porch, sometimes without speaking. He was there when silence was no longer heavy, but healing. One evening, as the sun sank behind the trees and painted the sky in gold, I stood in my garden, the roses blooming wild and unapologetic. I thought of Samantha's words, "Say hi to the bear." She had meant it as a death sentence, a final joke before erasing me. But I had survived the bear. And now she would face a different kind of predator, the truth she couldn't outrun. I whispered into the cool evening air, not to Samantha, not to Daniel, but to myself, "I do not vanish. I endure." And with that I turned toward my house, my life, my future, rebuilt, reclaimed, and utterly my own.